choice to make for a capstone for a one semester project, right?
Yeah.
So like, you know, how still about that? I say that because the team I think did pretty well, but you know, those are where you're gonna like poke that and be like, okay. You also have time to give critiques in a class,
Yeah.
so we can like really do a more traditional. Yeah, some of these because again, it's not because those are fun things you chose.
And I know that some of the students that have done capstones before, they've actually continued it, right? Like, Icon, wasn't that a capstone?
That was game project.
Yes. Oh yeah. That was a
game.
game. Well, some of them, yeah. Some of the teams make these or their game projects, or really, you know, some of the other things too, and kind of build on them.
Okay.
So like, you know, I always tell my game to impact students like, always put it in the phrasing of, and you're gonna build on it.
Yeah.
And I told them, I was like, will that'd be cool. I don't expect it. Capstone's a game project. It almost like we've had a lot of studios get captioned. So, you know, yeah, if you kind of tell them those in terms of like when you keep working on this.
Yeah. Oh wait, what happened?
Yeah, no, it was really well put together. And I mean, you all had, well, you weren't on like chin strap capstone, but it's like you and the chin strap team kind of like all came together, and you're on our team. So it's like, because you know, you almost have like two IPs in the tank right now. Yeah, which is great because it's like you better do something that go in a little tank.
I think Sarah, when she takes like a little break from the art town, is gonna come to Chinstrap and fix everything.
Yeah.
Because apparently Chinstrap is like the coaches are
On the back. Oh yeah. Made this semester? Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine all of your codes are that. Yeah. Everybody's code is trash. That's not a criticism. That's just fact.
All right, let's get this show on the road.
Oh no.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
I think it means unchained.
Yes.
I'm gonna look up the definition for you.
Okay.
That I gave you, right?
Okay. Everybody in Capstone. Hello. So I'll keep it short because you all have heard the briefing at least once today, right? Generally speaking, if not, okay. There will be a 1 minute warning. It'll be over there. The sheet of paper says 1 minute on it doesn't raise or around. So just be aware of that. That minute is at the end of your session, not at the end of your participation time. So for those of you with 25 minutes, 24 minutes, 25 minutes, 10 minutes, 19 minutes, you'll get that 1 minute. The thumbs up inside the first video, the tubes up, so the first video, the second video, back to back, so whenever you're ready, all arranged at the seats, thumbs up. The seats are arranged such that don't go on either side of it, either sit in the seats or stand in front of them, or the stools, because the camera and the lighting is set up for that specific frame. And then microphone etiquette, holding the microphone out like this, hold it more aimed at your mouth because it helps with noise rejection and volume and everything makes it easier for them up there. And I think that's it. So, any questions? Okay, let's go. It's a long day. So, heroes don't have horns. Exactly.
Do you want to, while they're getting onto the stage, do you want to introduce?
Yes, I need to capstone. So, 1 second, sorry, I need to do the intro for everyone else watching. So, I realized I need to do a brief intro. So, for everyone else watching, and everyone who's unfamiliar, this is Senior Capstone, which is a project class, and it's kind of the culmination of our students' career through the program. And the start of the class is a research paper, which is about, what, 4 weeks? So they have 4 weeks to do research that helps inform and drive their project, which is either some type of a game or animation, or we've had in past semesters kind of mixed media productions. some very interesting marriages of those things. So yeah, we'll let Heroes Don't Have Horns take it away.
Hi, we are Heroes Don't Have Horns. I'm Marie Thornton. I was the project lead for both Senior Capstone and our real-time rendering project.
Hi, my name is Jordan Kopp. I did the environmental game or design, blueprinting, and animation.
Hi, I'm James Roman. I'm an animator.
I'm Logan Rachka, and I was part of level design.
So our central thesis was the idea of making game bugs actual mechanics in the game, sort of in the tradition of speedrunning and other enjoyable game bugs that become features in games, but instead of having them be incidental features, them being the actual mechanics of the game. We came to this just from having that enjoyment idea of having the game bugs as mechanics. And we built the story around that idea, which is sort of also playing into the idea of, is cheating a bad thing? Or is it about when you cheat or why you cheat? So media has explored this in many different forms, especially when it comes to video games. In the idea of sometimes the only way you can win is by cheating. And so in that tradition, this is going to be a choice and consequence game where you would have a branching narrative where you get to decide whether you actually use the cheat mechanics, whether you don't, what kind of hero that you are going through this world, and how that shapes whether or not your choice to cheat the system, which you can only become a hero by initially cheating. So the system is stacked against you, and just seeing how that affects the narrative of where you go from there. As I said, it would be a choice and consequence game, so you would have different dialogue choices and different story choices. It would have multiple endings, branching narrative, and one point would be that it would not lock you into any specific branch. As a person who's not a fan of, you have to be a good person the entire game to get the good ending, and what does that even mean? Good can be very subjective. So different routes would be determined by if you started out being a selfless hero and then later on learned more boundaries or became jaded, or if you started out as a selfish hero who wants to prove yourself but not necessarily for the right reasons. You just kind of want to show up the people who didn't believe in you and grew and matured into someone who is more selfless and wants to help people from a genuine place instead of just wanting to show what you can do.
So for our project, we made the decision to have 3 levels, which was a village level, a cave level, and a forest level. In order to focus on our game mechanics, we decided to use pre-made assets for the environmental design. This decision allowed us to focus on aspects like our dialogue system, our quest system, our inventory system, and more mechanics that would benefit our game and our storytelling. The level that establishes the town and starts the story is the Elven Village, which you can see here on the screen. So on the left here, you can see that there is the map, which is where we started the process of doing the environmental design. On the right, we did our gray boxing, and then in the middle, you can see where we started to do our detailing and finalizing the level. Our team followed this process of drawing out a map, gray boxing the level, and then going on to detail it for each level. 2 systems that I created for this project are the quest system and the inventory system. Both of these systems were created in Unreal Engine using blueprints and widgets. The quest system works by assigning a quest to the player when they overlap with the trigger box. Each quest is assigned in its own trigger box, which on overlap assigns quest objectives to the player. When the player completes these objectives, the quest gets moved from the active quests to the finished quests. The inventory system allows the players to pick up objects into their inventory and drop them back into the world if it is no longer needed. This is used in the forest level where the player needs to collect an item called energy root, duplicate it, and then use it to help a player escape.
We also integrated on Epic's game animation sample pack, specifically with traversals. That way we had a wider range of motions that we could use, such as crouching, jumping up, pulling yourself up on ledges, and putting all of that together so that you would be able to do that as the main character.
For the animations, we utilized P4V to upload passes and get feedback, figure out where we needed to improve to progress further. And
we also use a multi-pass system where we did multiple passes of animation, with each pass adding more detail and more fluid animation to the main character. We did 3 separate cutscenes that would be determined by which route you had taken initially: the selfless hero route, the growing hero route, or the selfish hero route, with different walk styles for each.
Our game went through a few changes in scope due to reductions in team and meeting times. For example, these images show the gray boxing for the forest level, which I was in charge of. Initially, this level was going to be much larger, and there would be a big focus on a wall clipping mechanic, which would allow the player to traverse obstacles and access hidden areas and items. Those pink shapes are what would have been the walls that could be clipped through. But due to scope changes, the level was scaled down and changed, so it would instead focus on the item duplication mechanic, like she mentioned, with the wall clip ability being unlocked at the very end.
The slide's still going, but that is the future implementations. We would start the game pretty much from the ground up, so that we were making our own original assets. We were making a lot more levels to go with the expanded story, more original character models, environmental assets, and actually having that full story mapped out. And with that, we are open for questions.
So I really like what you guys have here. I just had a couple questions. So I see on here several 3D platformer style levels. So I'm kind of wondering what the gameplay is like. I noticed when, at least from this video, we got what I assume are the final option like cutscenes, right? Is that what we saw at the beginning?
So they would only be the final option cutscenes for like finishing the tutorial levels. After that, yeah, so it would just be you're about to set off into the world, and what attitude do you have for setting off into the world?
So I don't exactly know what you guys were kind of given for this, but I really wanted to see gameplay because your idea for your mechanic is awesome and something that sounds really innovative and unique. However, I'm not fully sold on it because we didn't really get to see it. I think even just from that one photo that you gave us of the wall clipping idea, I was like, oh, I need to see this now. Like, so I think if you could present it, which obviously you'll have your demo out there, right? So I'm gonna check it out, but I think presenting that would be really useful for us to kind of be able to critique a little bit better. But besides that, I like the ideas that you guys have, and I'm interested to see how they kind of weave together. And I wish you luck on kind of starting from the ground up and doing that.
All right, yeah. So first of all, I really like the concept. I think any like mechanic that's like fourth wall breaking, I think is a lot of fun. But because the mechanic is fourth wall breaking, when you make it the I guess like the core gameplay mechanic, how do you balance that with like because something about a bug is like it's unintentional. It feels like it shouldn't be in there. But when that's what you're focusing on, what makes it feel like a bug and not just a mechanic that other games wouldn't have?
So I don't intend it. We don't intend it to be like a full fourth wall break. While there would be like some meta humor, it would be more in like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, irony sort of way. The style of writing that is intended to go in is more like the calling back to early 2000s campy 3D platformers, where it's a little bit more humor focused. And has that meta humor but isn't going into a full fourth wall break. We were going to implement the bugs as cheat skills, where you have to find, there are some that you have to go out and find and you earn the cheat skills, and others that you just organically discover through gameplay. But the ones that you have to go to find would be the ones that you would need to complete certain quests or potentially complete certain quests a certain way. Or in the organic ones would just be other ones that we thought would be fun to include.
Okay. So I guess another extension off that is, so say you have like the duplication. When you do the quest, do you just unlock like a button and you press an input and then it duplicates?
So the goal with that one would be that you would go to grab an object, you would interrupt that, and then the container would be destroyed, so you can only do it once, but you would get 2 of the item after when you interrupted the pull from the storage chest to your inventory.
Okay, and then like last clarification, sorry. When you do the quest, does it give you the ability to do that, or does it just tell you that you can do that, and it's more of like a, I guess it just nudges you towards like, hey, by the way, this is like a game break that you can do like within the game?
So that is the first cheat skill that you get from who will be your mentor character, and then he tells you, hey, if you go beat the boss at the end of this dungeon, you can get another cheat skill, which is the wall clipping mechanic.
With the morality system, is that tied to your actions, or is that more like a dialogue system?
So it would be both. It would be both things that you say in dialogue and story choices you make with Quest having multiple choices for how you can choose to complete them.
Gotcha. And then a follow-up. I think a few of us were asking between ourselves, is the name possibly inspired by Plumbers Don't Wear Ties?
No, I haven't actually heard that title before. It was mostly just inspired by me seeing the tiefling model and going, oh, she kind of looks like an elf with horns.
Well, you're better off not looking up that other game. It's not worth playing.
I don't get the reference.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was wondering is, because the whole game is about mechanics that are turns into bugs, right? And I saw that you had a Witcher with the horse on top, and I experienced some recent bugs when I played Witcher, and I just loved it because it brought me back to, I loved it when games had problems, because now they're too polished.
Yes, we did look into, as part of our research, the Eurojank movement and how it has embraced the less polished, glitchy gameplay.
Yeah, and it makes it feel real. But what I was wondering is, for your like hero characters, do you have multiple characters that you could choose from to play?
I was considering when continuing the project to possibly have a customizable main character, but that's still sort of in the air with how we would figure out starting it from the ground up.
Because one of the things I was going to say is, like, if you had people where they could choose attributes, like maybe they already start off with like a slide where they just slide through the level, and that's like a power up that is like a bug, or even like they're not, like they're in the, like if they go to fall, they don't fall, and so they just kind of like act like they're falling, and then you can keep going. Just
like
like
the glitch in, oh my goodness, Risen.
yeah, just in general, like if they're
You just
clipped
hit the
and
buttons the buttons and it just slowly puts you down.
yeah,
Yep.
like that type of thing where you can, they already have that ability, and then or yeah, or classes, like certain classes that cause that ability. That would be a interesting expansion if you continue this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love the idea of using mechanics as breaking games mechanics. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Should I hand this down back down to them?
You should. You guys want to hold one down there?
So just
Hold one.
FYI, I think that's kind of.
Me and Scott. Yeah. Should we do some feedback moments? I like how you put yours drop very hard. we.
It's not representative.
This is the kind of game, right?
I think it's the 3
Sega Saturn, Sega CD.
Hi, I'm Lily Blackwell, group lead and main coder for Illustris.
Hi, I'm Cole Owens. I worked on the level design and environmental design.
Hi, I'm Madeline Vermillion. I did 2D art and UI and lighting.
Hello, I'm Damiana Johnson, and I did the 2D animation of the trailer.
Hi, I'm Colt Hyde. I made the 3D character, and I just helped out here and there.
Illustris initially began under a different group lead, whose vision for the game was to create a platformer with puzzle elements that was visually compelling and utilized themes of light and dark. In order to achieve this, we researched similar games in the puzzle and platforming genres as a whole, in order to figure out what made these games successful. One big inspiration for us was Ori and the Blind Forest. In that game, manipulating light is an essential part of gameplay. It's used to defeat enemies, reveal pathways forward, and to upgrade and unlock new abilities for the player.
As well, inspirations for our game were included Trine and Little Nightmares. The puzzles in those games were inspirations for the gameplay puzzles within ours. In Illustris, we wanted the game to be enjoyable for all audiences, especially a younger demographic, and so we chose not to include combat. Instead, we wanted to focus on the player's journey and encourage exploration. The way forward might appear clear, but requires you to manipulate your abilities just right in order to progress. Where platformers often focus on novel movement abilities, we wanted Illustris to focus more on puzzles than solely movement. For our assets, we went with a stylized look that would complement the simple design of our main character. We used a stylized nature pack for the first level and a stylized crystal mine pack for the cave level. We also used additional assets for the Wisp's abilities. For that, we used a stylized fire VFX and tweaked it for our needs. As well, some assets we made ourselves, like the main character, and for that, we didn't want to use an asset pack in order to make it feel original for our game. I was originally working on level design, but I had to pivot to coding due to the departure of some team members. Since I'm more familiar with Unreal's visual blueprinting than C++, I created a new Unreal project and started recreating the Wisp's abilities there. My first priority was making our blockouts walkable, and so I created ladders and platforms that would grow and move. After that, I made it so that the ladders and bridges would grow when the growth wisp overlaps with them, as well as adding switches that the light wisp can activate. I also added the logic for the wisps to follow the player and stay put when the player clicks while they're deployed. I created the level sketches and a rough blockout for level 1. The idea for level 1 was to keep it simple and let the player test their abilities and get a feel for them. The growth wisp allows you to grow bridges and ladders at preset spots within the level, but only while the wisp is touching the ladder or bridge. Once the wisp leaves, the bridge or ladder gradually shrinks. The light wisp activates switches in order to remove obstacles around the level.
I was tasked with the level design and creating the environments. Level 1 was actually designed by Lily, and I took over doing the environmental work. Level 2 was fully designed by me and decorated by me. For the levels, we wanted level 1 to be the starter or beginner level for the player. Throughout level 1, it teaches you how to use your growth wisp, which is the green one, in order to traverse the environment. There are bridges you can grow to cross pits that you can fall into if you're not careful, or there are ladders you can grow to climb trees or climb down trees in order to get around obstacles you cannot walk around. When designing level 2, I thought of the idea of a dark world needing light and instantly thought of a cave. I took some of the previously learned mechanics and implemented them into level 2, used the bridge growth to cross pits full of crystals and the ladders to climb down further into the cave. For new mechanics in the level, we have the yellow wisp. This wisp is for the activation of switches. In level 3, there are 2 areas where you must use your character's light to find these switches to open up the doors that are blocking your path. Once you use your yellow wisp to activate it, you can advance to the next level. Level 2 also incorporates moving platforms to change up the environment to help with traversal. For the environmental work of the cave, I wanted to feel as you are in a cave, but not wanting the scenery to be too bland, just full of rocks. I added crystal formations and ores around the level to add some visuals to it. Madeline did the lighting for both levels 1 and 2, keeping both the levels dark, but light enough to be able to see the environment and the player.
As the 2D artist, I took on the responsibility of creating the main menu and settings screens for Illustris. The main menu is critical to making a positive first impression for the player when they enter the game, as it is what they will usually base their expectations for the game on. My goal when choosing the overall aesthetic was to convey a feeling of whimsy and dreaminess. The background image was made using a screen capture of some of the in-game assets that were set up as a cinematic background. For the buttons and interactable parts of the UI, I used colors from the color scheme that is used in our title logo, illustrated by Damiana. All other graphics were made by myself using Adobe Photoshop. The plain buttons pictured in the bottom right are in the following order. The default button color, the color when hovered over, and the color when clicked on. Additionally, I selected a custom font for the UI called Magic Hour, which is free for use under the Creative Commons. Beyond designing the look of the menus, I also worked on visual blueprinting for the functionality of these screens. As shown previously, the main menu includes a settings screen that contains gameplay customization options for resolution, window mode, and graphics quality. Getting everything to work as intended was a significant learning curve, as this is my first experience with any form of coding. Pictured in the top image are my lines for clicking the back button and clicking the left and right change resolution buttons, respectively. In the bottom image are my lines for clicking the full screen mode to change it and clicking the Apply Changes button. I was also able to set up a relatively simple function for retrieving the player's game user settings and then displaying the correct values. The biggest challenge for me was creating the blueprints for the graphics quality setting, as I had some initial issues with the selected quality not displaying correctly on the settings screen. Another one of my tasks as a 2D artist was creating the concept art for the main character of Illustrious. During the brainstorming process, we had a very general idea that we would be focusing on the concept of light and light sources. Taking things like lanterns as inspiration, I created a couple of initial designs in which the main character was either a sort of flame elemental or had a lantern for a head. The lantern head for the character won our group popularity vote, and we decided to turn the flame motif into a companion wisp instead of completely scrapping it. After this decision, I played around with incorporating the 2 different body shapes from the first pass into the character, and it was ultimately refined into what you see now in the visual on the right. We ended up combining elements of both body shapes and came to a happy middle ground for our little guy. The next step in bringing our main character to life was to illustrate a polished character sheet that could be followed to create the proportionate 3D model. During this stage, I came up with a color palette for the character involving lots of cool tones with blues, greens, and purples. When most people typically think of firelight, they tend to imagine warm hues like red, orange, and yellow, so we really wanted to take a unique and whimsical approach with the blue-green flame color. Since our character takes on an adventurous and heroic role in the storyline of Illustrious, we also decided after the initial sketching phase to give him a cape to add some flourish. Design-wise, this would also, in theory, help to balance out the top-heavy nature of my initial designs, making the overall silhouette of the character more well-balanced and generally appealing. And here you can see I did 2 versions on a light background and a dark background to show the glowing effect.
Okay, so I use Blender for the character creation process. This is my second time ever doing something like this, so YouTube videos, online guides, and inspiration from Ori and the Blind Forest were great helpers. Built the character off of our concept art, modeling the torso, heads, arms, legs, and the lantern. To be clear, I took an approach of making each part modular and independent, only combining them towards the end of the modeling process. I found this method to be very useful in getting the shapes as spot on as possible. Originally, the character had a cape. However, difficulty in figuring out cloth physics had it being cut. Getting the character in the game as soon as possible has always been the priority. That said, scope changes were abundant in this project. Texturing was a challenge. Wrapping my head around UV unwrapping and then texturing was far more nuanced than I originally thought. As such, textures are just simple materials reminiscent of the character's color scheme. In future iterations, I'd like to make custom textures with proper shading, as the artwork made for this game is truly wonderful in my opinion. Designing against the popular free resource such as Mixamo, the model was rigged by hand, creating an armature skeleton for movement. Weight painting is known for being a nightmare, from my experience. However, Blender's auto weight painting tool was a great aid. More work was then done to ensure the lantern remains rigid, while the character's wispy head is more fluid, on top of small white changes here and there for the rest of the body. Animations were made that were intended to show the ghostly or magical abilities our character has, floating everywhere, never quite touching the ground. Ideally, this character would have had more animations for jumping, but as of now, it's a simple walk, jump, fall, idle. After all of this, the character was ported into Unreal. From there, the goal was to make it functional. The character was poured over using the character blueprint to move and utilize all their abilities. Then animations were set up through an animation blend space for filling the goal of simulating movement. Overall, what I made was a fully modeled and rigged character from the ground up and helped make it into a functional game. If I had more time, I would have loved to make it more fluid, eye-catching, textured, and additionally effects to show the magical wisp-like nature of them. However, I'm happy with what I made and excited to see what I can make with the knowledge I have gained. Pause for dramatic effect.
When creating the story for the trailer, I went through different iterations on how I wanted to introduce the character, till I landed on the idea that after reveal of the lantern in the forest, a nice close-up of the fires being extinguished, and from the lantern came the character representing a spark of hope. So I did it as an origin story for the character and its starting point of why it starts this journey. On the storyboard, I made some changes along the way for the final animation, for the reason for your eyes to focus on the most important focal point, which is the lantern itself, which the character will be revealed. I wanted to implement a style of 2D animation with 3D background. For the animation side, I started using Clip Studio Paint for the character animation, and I used it also for making the lantern props. All the fire animation was done in 2D as well to give a paper look for the animation. And after that, I just used the software Odyssey that Unreal has and inserted it by importing the images into it, and it played out smoothly. By having Odyssey, it made the job easier at adding 2D asset into the 3D background. Because of making every character animation and some assets in 2D, I made sure that I didn't have to cut certain shots. I knew the best option was to make a background in 3D and Unreal. This helps so I can now put more of my focus on the character animation and save myself more time to perfect everything. All the setting was done in Unreal, and I put the lighting on night mode to make the lantern more of a focal point. Adding in the character was easy by having Odyssey, and it converted all the assets and dragged and dropped directly into the 3D background. After animation and composition of each shot was finalized, I took everything in Premiere Pro. The text was shown in the trailer was done in After Effects. I didn't want to leave the white text as a stagnant image and wanted to give off a more mystery feeling when shown. The illustrious logos that came to the decision of dissolving to black like a logo itself was burning away. I called back to the flame in the beginning that was burned out with the lantern scene.
All right, I got a lightning round for you because I don't know how much time we have. I really like the logo. I feel like the kerning, that's the distance between the letters, yes? Tracking. Oh, so, or whatever. I feel like it might need to be increased a little bit because I know we both were like, I can't read that. But it's really nice. I really like it. I think that what you guys have, considering like your scope and the fact that you had to restart, I'm sorry that happened. I think it's very amazing what you were able to create, especially considering, I think you were saying that you had to basically remake all the code, right? Okay, that's incredible that you guys were able to do that. One of the questions I have is, why did you do 3D instead of 2D? Because I think those character designs work really well as like a 2D character. And while I think that it's working in 3D, I think that you might be able to find more success in what you want in a 2D space. So why did you choose 3D over 2D?
Originally, the game was supposed to be 2.5D. The idea of that got mixed around because what is 2.5D? There's a bunch of different definitions. As long as it's not 2D and it's not 3D, it's 2.5D. So we had a couple of different iterations of what we would need for the camera and whatnot. So we had, after I had gotten the code all done, we actually had two cameras. There was a camera for side-scrolling and a camera that was more of a fixed camera. I think the inspiration was like Mario 64 or something like that. But I do think that having it in a 2.5D does add something for the world, because it gives us the ability to make the background a lot more exciting than if it was just 2D.
From what I saw of the 2.5D gameplay, I think the concept works, and I think the background can be made more exciting. I think that, again, this is just from what I saw, it looked like there might be some issues with the contrast and having the character stand out while also not having it like be too visually busy. I think that one way you could work on that is just desaturate everything that isn't the character so that you don't just have to overexpose the character to make them stand out more.
So hi. I really thought it looked awesome. I love the visual design of it. I think the mechanics look really cool, and I encourage you to keep working on it because I think like you have a potential festival entry in something like this. I think it's visually really neat. To kind of piggyback off of the thing about the 2.5 background style and things like that, I would also encourage you to explore like 2D sprites and things like that for some of the character designs and some of the artwork. You mentioned having worrying about like the background being as dynamic. So what engine are you using to build it? Is it Unreal or it's Unreal? Okay.
Yeah, Unreal.
Yeah, I asked that question and I was like, wait, they showed us blueprinting, duh. Sorry. But one of the things that we are doing on a project right now is we are building faux 3D backgrounds with 2D sprites by layering cameras. So basically, you know, and you alluded to this, you have like a foreground camera. Our foreground camera is at an orthogonal viewpoint, and that's just showing stuff flat. But then we have backgrounds that are switched on to, we're doing Unity, but like we have background cameras that are only rendering like between X and Y distance, you know, arbitrary numbers. And what that does is that though they project in perspective, and what that lets us do is make the easy way to say it is parallax backgrounds, but because there's also perspective effects, we get that draw distance of being able to like have rows of columns and architectural effects and things like that. So explore some of those like multiple camera setup rigs. There's actually a few articles on like gamedeveloper.com about people doing similar things. You might find, if you get a little tricky with your camera setups, you might find some good things. The other thing you can do too to make them interesting is like go play Silksong. Recommendation for everybody, go play Silksong, it's good. But like you can see how they do something like that, but then they blur background like past a certain point, and then that gives you that like, ooh, what's back there mystery of it. So suggestions.
All right, real quick. So I heard you were talking about balancing like light with dark. There were some scenes where the background was just super dark, and I think there are ways that you can like imply darkness without it actually being dark. Because I think a lot of the elements in the background weren't very visible, and I think it's just as simple as maybe introducing like cooler lights or just anything to like that you can. Just something that defines the background a bit more, and it's a pretty simple fix, but just something I thought I'd comment on.
Sorry. Whoa. One of the things that I think could use some work on is some of the UI. I don't think it really matches the logo in terms of how edgy the logo looks. It doesn't look whimsical to me, but maybe that's just because I'm looking at that and I'm thinking it's a heavy metal band. So I would definitely work on trying to match your logo with your UI or roughen out the hard edges, but I guess you're trying to go with flame, so I can't really say it's, you know, you kind of get what I'm saying. And then if you guys decide to continue with 3D, I know you mentioned you didn't want to use Mixamo. Was there a reason why you wanted to not use Mixamo?
To be honest, it's because when I put it in there the first time, the lantern got all wonky. I was like, this isn't going to work.
Okay.
So then I just did it by myself.
Okay, then that makes sense, why you forwent it. Because I know that there are some good things and bad things about Mixamo. So, but that's basically what I would say is try to make the logo kind of match with the whole game overall look. Yeah.
Something I really liked is that you guys mentioned that the game doesn't have enemies. Is that correct? It has
Yes.
puzzles. That's really fun. I think that a lot of games feel the need to add enemies because it's just a staple of many games, but I don't think you have to have it. I think that that's really fun. I'm excited to play it and kind of see how that works out. What led you guys to kind of make that decision? Because I know some of the other games that you had talked about do feature enemies. So what kind of changed and caused you to want to make just puzzles instead of combat?
So one thing was I wasn't the original group leader for this project. There was somebody else, and that's whose vision the game originally was. And when we had, I was originally a level designer, and I had talked about maybe adding enemies in the forms of like the shadowlings or something, and she was like, absolutely not. We are absolutely not adding enemies to the game because it's not going to add anything to the game, and I don't want our little guy to hurt people. Originally as well, the light wisp was a light beam that he would shoot that would light Bramble on fire, and she said, no, our little guy's not lighting things on fire.
I like the little wisp guy. That was a really good addition. Yeah, it was fun to incorporate that other idea into a separate character. That's really fun. We got 1 minute left. Also, I think a large TV screen. The projector's kind of letting us down a little bit. Can we get
Little lack.
Lacker. We did not introduce ourselves.
Lacker 2. The second.
Yeah, but the cloud's a little lack.
Oh.
What's that? Mike. Just say
I'm Justice Fike, and I was the project lead.
Diane Badillo, I was character design and environment design.
I'm Cole Browning. I was level design and sound.
I'm Dominic. I was asset designer, character designer, and animator.
I'm Jen Vivian. I was the gym and locker room level designer and asset maker.
Our game is set in the fictional town of Rockford in the mid-1990s. The main feature of the game includes a camera which the player uses to fight the Shadeborn and solve puzzles around the school. We wanted the player to be able to explore the school and solve puzzles to figure out what happened in the past to cause the school to shut down and everyone to leave. Our goal for the project was to explore how the use of in-game media devices and implementing real-life culture and folklore affects storytelling. Some of the games that we looked at for inspiration for this was Outlast and Fatal Frame for their use of media devices such as video cameras and photo cameras and how they use culture throughout.
When designing the Shadeborn, we wanted an original creature instead of taking a specific culture's folklore. We were inspired by general cryptid abilities like strength or flight, but the Shadeborn's looks and identity are unique to our game. I focused on making it look unsettling with no arms, hollow eyes, and a vertical mouth that appears only when it feeds. It feels like something that belongs in the dark, which fits our gameplay where light is your only main defense. I also made character sketches that I created for our main cast that you will see soon. Dylan is the player character on the left there, and Aiden is the one on the top right. He's the friend that Dylan is trying to reach inside the school. Taylor is Aiden's sister. She will appear in future updates as we expand the story. Right now, we only see Dylan's first-person arms, but these sketches will give us a good reference as we add full body models and more character interactions later in the future. For the environment design, I also arranged each room in a way that helps tell the story of what happened inside the school. Like desks pushed into barricades to show students defending themselves, or small details like the chalkboard writing to help show how things fell apart. I also designed the clues that players find around the school, giving them pieces of what happened as they explore. In the future, I plan on adding more clues to deepen the mystery and the story.
As an asset designer and animator, I was in charge of modeling and animating our main monster, the Shadeborn. Using a base humanoid mesh as my starting point, I sculpted and moved the body around in Autodesk Maya until it fit within the concept design of our monster. Afterwards, I textured it in Substance Painter with the goal in mind to make it appear as if the beast was rotting. Once fully rigged, I animated various movement cycles and idle animations in Blender and then exported them to Unreal Engine for us to use. Additionally, I created various different assets for us to use in the game, such as chairs, books, desks, cabinets, even ventilation pipes and more to help us shape our high school atmosphere.
So for the sound, I really wanted to match the aesthetic of the game. So when I sourced the different sounds, I wanted them to not be so basic and kind of add kind of like an ambiance to each level. So I added an eerie ambiance to each level. It kind of adds some depth, and it almost makes the player feel as if they're in a big room all alone, nowhere to go. It kind of adds to the fear factor of the game. I also added proximity beeps to the fire alarms, which beep when the player walks by, which can catch them off guard, kind of startle them. I also added open and close sounds to the doors, as well as footsteps to the Shadeborn as well. And when doing these sounds, I wanted to make sure that they were loud enough for you to be able to hear them, but they weren't too overpowering. And for the level design of the basement, I came up with some concept art. I used a lot of inspiration from the movie It, specifically the sewer scenes. I like the look of the claustrophobic, tight, water dripping kind of look. So I kind of used that as an influence for my concept art. I used overhanging pipes, a lot of obstacles throughout the levels, and things kind of laying out throughout the floor. I plan on expanding on this and creating new assets like pipes and maybe like a workbench and other things like that.
For the locker room design, the original concept that I went with was using the mechanics of crouching to go under the lockers. The left side has a lot more space for the player to explore with different paths to try to get away from the Shadeborn, where the right side is a lot more linear with areas for you to hide away from them. And I wanted to make it look like there was more of the Shadeborn going through the right side So in the final version, I decided to make it a little bit more messy to add a creepy atmosphere as you went to go through with the key. In the future, we're going to add crouching, hiding, puzzles, and more clues. And for the gym, I decided to go with a open space trying to do a boss arena with a creature called the Jersey Devil, which would swiftly move around the gym as you would hide, trying to take pictures of it with your camera to stun it. And then as it was stunned, you would go out into the open and try to solve the puzzle. The current version has an enemy horde where you do sneak behind the bleachers and you try to get to safety. And in the future, we're going to add the boss, the puzzle, and a few extra assets.
I created the level design for the main school and the library maze. For this, I looked at layouts of schools built around the late 1980s to make them accurate for the period and more of a realistic layout. The main school building is sort of like a hub for all the other levels, connecting everything in between them, while the library is made to confuse the player and introduce the player to the Shadeborn at the start of the game and get the player to use the camera to get out. For the coding, we created a dynamic inventory system which will rearrange itself to better fit however many items the player has within it. And for the camera, we used a collision system to either stun or delete the different enemies that the player will face throughout the school. The enemy has a nav system that is always looking for the player character, and if you're fast enough or able to hide around corners or in rooms, they can lose sight of you and will stop following.
Hi. I'm actually not familiar at all with this genre of games. I know that's pretty bad. But what I was wondering is, if with your gameplay, do you have free reign of the school like immediately, or do certain defeating certain enemies unlocks the gym or unlocks the cellar, or are the characters just roaming around?
So at the beginning, you start, for the prologue, you come in through the roof because the front door is locked, and you find yourself into the smaller library, and you start with by being teleported into the big maze and being introduced to all the gameplay mechanics and that. And then after that, you get teleported into the main school level, and you can explore all the classrooms and that are unlocked. But to get to the levels after, you do have to solve puzzles and get keys and codes to get to the other areas.
Okay. And the whole point is to escape the school but save your friend at the same time?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for including the unlit versions of your level designs. I think that helped me understand the gameplay and the world a lot more. Thank you for that. So one of the things you guys brought up as your inspiration was Outcast, which is Outlast. Oh my gosh, sorry. Yeah, Outcast makes music. Never mind. Very different inspiration. So Outlast, right? Something that Outlast does that is really unique is they don't just use the camera as a... I know you mentioned that you have like a photography part later in the game, right? That's not in it currently, right? The photography part with the Jersey Devil where you take pictures of it, that's not in the game yet, right?
To stun and deal with the enemies, you can use the camera. It is implemented.
Okay, just making sure. Because my question was going to be like, what are you guys doing differently from Outlast? Because Outlast works with, like, they stun the camera with lights, or you have to have batteries to keep going throughout the game. So what is, like, your main mechanic in terms of that camera, right? So you're using the flash from it to stun enemies, but what else can you do with it, and how does that interact with the world?
We did not get it implemented yet, but we did want to add like puzzles that you can only see while you're looking down the lens of the camera and stuff, where you have to find codes on walls and stuff.
So you can look through the camera and also take it away, right, at any time?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that would be fun. I think that that's kind of what I was confused about when, like, I was like, why are we using a camera? There has to be some type of gameplay reason that like justifies it, but that sounds right.
With the camera mechanic, is there any objective or ideas for taking photos of like certain objects or certain entities as like a collectible kind of thing?
We did want to add it where you can take pictures of clues and stuff like that, and also the monsters. And we wanted it to be like at the end of the game, when it showed the credits, it would show like the pictures you took throughout the game.
Okay, yeah. I might have missed it, and apologize if I do. Were there cues for the cryptid monster when he's nearby at all? Because something that I find to be effective with horror is I like to stay scared throughout the whole experience, and sometimes when I keep running to the monster out of nowhere, it becomes more of a rage game than a horror game because I keep dying to the monster, and I'm like, this is becoming stupid and repetitive. And if you don't have the, either like a visual indicator or a sound indicator if the entity's nearby, do you have anything like that?
We do have footsteps for when you're nearby to the Shadeborn.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah, on the trailer, it was kind of brought up, but you've alluded to the camera, but it didn't really come across in the trailer very well. So, like, always make sure that you mainline any, like, really neat feature, right? Because, from the trailer, I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, they made Slender, but in a high school. So, yeah, you want to be careful with that if you do have something that really makes it stand apart. This isn't just you, this is several teams, like font choices, make really good font choices, like be very careful. Like the kind of, for you, the sort of handwritten-y looking typeface was like, oh, it's not really scary. You want to have something that does have that like, horror movie look. So, look at other horror movies, look at posters of horror movies, look at trailers for horror movies and see what they're doing with their typefaces to kind of match that look. The 3D texturing, it looked a little bland, it looked a little plain. I think it looks like you were almost going for a PlayStation 1 look a little bit. I think you could have gone further. I think, because I just got an analog 3D and have been playing a lot of like mid-90s 3D, like early 3D games, like N64 games. And yeah, they really try to do like photo texture, but like 64 by 64, pixels, but like with N64, it's blurry. PlayStation, they're like very sharp. But I think you could have gone further into that. So I think a texture pass like that. You had a lot of different cryptids, but then you keep talking about this Shadeborn. Can you explain how you went from like researching lots of cryptids to like one cryptid? Like what's the link there?
Well, we just basically looked up all the folklore that we could find, and we were inspired with all the abilities of the cryptids, and then just created our own instead.
Okay, but as sort of like your cryptid is a sort of like distillation of lots of, okay, that makes sense. And then when presenting, and again, just general for everybody, like we know you used Maya, we know you don't have to describe that. Everybody did that. That's like the bare minimum. Tell us what inspired you. Just listing the list of software you did. Like, of course you did. Yeah, everybody did that. So like, make sure you're telling us the creative direction behind it. A painter wouldn't be like, well, then I mixed it with linseed oil and then brushed it on the canvas, right? So just be careful when you do that. Tell us what got you excited about it. But I mean, overall, it looks really cool. Like I like horror games a lot, so I think this will be a fun play.
Mechanic-wise, is there anything stopping the player from just snapping the camera at all times?
Yes, it does have a delay after you take a
Okay.
picture. Oh, I did also want to say that we were going for like a PS2 style, like looking at like Silent Hill and that, and we did model all the assets in the game ourselves.
I wanted to say congratulations on modeling all the assets because that is something that is very, very difficult to do. And I'm sure it took you guys a long time, but it shows in the fact that like you own everything that's in your game, and that's very, very useful. Did you use any post-processing effects to get the kind of PS2 aesthetic, or are we just kind of going with regular resolution, no post-processing, just the models are kind of simple? Is that kind of the vibe we're going for the PS2 look?
Yeah, we wanted like the photo textures and stuff, just like low resolution and like the lower poly objects and all that.
Well, I would say look into post-processing because it can really push what you have further. I'm not 100% familiar with PS2. I'm very familiar with PS1 graphics and Unreal. But I would say that if you want to push the visual style even further, consider looking into some post-processing that could help you do that, and maybe even look into how those consoles worked and how the technical limitations from those consoles dictated the art that was made for them. Because I agree with what Chris was saying, some of the textures were a little interesting. Texture choices were a bit interesting, they're kind of distracting from the rest of the game, but if you're going for that type of style, you could learn a lot from playing games of that era and learning about the technical limitations and why the art looked that way. But good job on making all your assets. That's very, very good.
One final thing that I just actually realized I wanted to ask about. Since you're in a school, and this is going back to traversal of the space, will there be any, will there be like a school map that the people can go up to and be like, okay, that's where I'm at, so they can kind of make sure that they can like either map it out themselves, or do they pick up a map, or something like that?
We did not have a map mechanic because I didn't think that the school was like that confusing of a layout to just wander through and explore.
Okay, thanks.
Look, my berries, Mommy.
I have bad news. Grandma died last night.
What die means?
Her body stopped working, and she couldn't get better.
I said, am mad.
Why don't we plant a flower? And when we look at it, we'll think of Grandma.
I register as a grandma.
Hi, my name is Mackenzie Franks, and I was the project lead, animator, concept developer, scriptwriter, and artist for some of the backgrounds. Our project was a 2D animation with simple animation and simple background art, and it was working on the themes of grief for young children. Some research points was keeping it low stimulating and visually simple, using a mix of honesty and comfort without using euphemisms like sleeping, and trying to keep it short enough so that children and caregivers could have time to reflect afterwards and talk about what they just watched and talk about the feelings. Childhood grief is honestly overlooked in a lot of aspects, especially animation, and so children lack that tool to express themselves with complex emotions, so this provides language and imagery to help reassure them. And it's based on the real experience of sudden death and how fast life can change. And it helps children identify, name, and normalize big feelings such as grief and death. We're hoping that the audience can feel empowered to talk about grief and feel more understood and help make the topic of grief less scary to talk about and less taboo, especially with children and children animation. We went with a hand-drawn style with soft watercolor textures, limited movement, and calm pacing. We really wanted our animation to be simple so that the emotions and story could shine through. This is just some concept art from the beginning of the development of our animation. So for the animation pipeline, we did research and emotional planning, and then we did 3D models and reference videos, and then took the keys, extremes, and breakdowns to create outlines of the animation, and then went in with refined colors and base color, adding textures and soft details, highlights, and gentle shading. There's around 1,800 frames, and each frame has around 10 to 20 different layers, depending on what's going on in the sequence.
Hi, my name is Madeline. I was the scriptwriter and background artist of this animation. For our inspiration, we used the 90s animations Franklin and Little Bear to make it a supportive and comforting animation that helps young children process grief through nature, softness, and imagination. We decided to use soft watercolors to provide a gentle scene that encapsulates childhood innocence. So for our environment and mood, we used this color palette, and we were able to provide a quiet visual space where the garden represented growth and memory, and then the flower acts as storytellers where the nature becomes the narrator. And then for the background pipeline, Mackenzie actually created the 3D model and filmed it where we reference each scene for the order, and then after reviewing those scenes and then selecting the angles, she drew like a super simple layout of the background and then put our characters on top of it. And then I created the final piece. For the communication, the art communicates emotion through simple, soft, rounded shapes. For our characters, providing a sense of tenderness and innocence. The composition offers a closer look into characters' emotion, deepening the connection. And then the texture and style using watercolors evokes nostalgia and sincerity, where the hand-drawn art adds warmth to the animation. The software that we used was Procreate. It was the main source. We did the hand-drawn artwork on it, such as the character, background scene, and the animations. We also used After Effects to use for the animations, build the scenes, and add motion adjustments, and then assemble the actual animation. And then finally, Adobe Premiere Pro was used for editing, sound mixing, including the voiceovers, and then completing the actual render. For organizing it, we mainly used Google Drive to store most of our data, which was project files, shared assets, and the scripts. Helix Plan was used to track our project tasks, showing what needed done by when, and then Kitsu was used to manage the animation passes with review updates and keep track of progress through the rough and final animation. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was the last slide.
That was it.
So,
Yeah, I just had a question on your animation process. Some of it looked like it was done on twos. Was that just me, or were you animating on a particular frame rate there?
I will say some of it is a little bit different than the others. I did some of them by like a character hand creating that, and then some was done with clay, so they're slightly off.
I actually really enjoyed the animation portion, just because it was just, I liked how the message was just so sudden, and that's what you talked about, is that sometimes events happen, and you just can't really explain it very well, especially for children who don't know how to handle their emotions. And I liked that you showed the kid getting mad, but that's just because they don't understand why they're getting mad. And then I liked how you diverted their anger to go plant a flower, which was really, really good. Yeah, I mean, I really don't have any terror, like, that. It was great. I really enjoyed the message that you had.
Thank you.
One small note I'd like to bring up is I think the timing could be a little bit improved. So, like, after the child receives the news, I think there could be a little bit of a pause for us to, like, see them take it in, and then a little bit afterwards for the mom to, like, be more ready to, like, say, here's what we're gonna do.
In our earlier ones, before we had to cut the scope down a little bit, we had probably another 2-3 minutes of the animation, and it definitely had adding in that and a little bit more to make it seem a little bit
Cut for time, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, kind of on that, I felt like there could have been a little more force when the child kicked the bucket of strawberries. It just kind of felt a little slow on that. But that's something you can fix on your next pass, though. I did have another question, though. It was, did you speak to any psychologists or child psychologists to kind of get ideas on a good way to treat this and storyline?
Yes. So when we did the research paper, I reached out to Mr. Jones. He's the death and dying professor at Kent State, and we went over the initial script and the idea of it, and he kind of just went through, added some points of maybe add this in, such as them getting upset and mad, because most kids don't, especially that age, don't understand the difference between being upset and sad. They just think it's the same thing. We also talked with a child psychologist throughout the entire thing, so when the scope did need to be shortened a little bit, they made sure to help me make sure the main points to get the general idea of the animation to be there, and made sure that throughout the whole thing it was going along with what a child psychologist would advise and what they might experience when children experience this kind of death.
I think that your guys' scope was pretty good. I wanted to mention that. Sometimes capstone projects can kind of balloon into these huge things, need to be chopped back. I think maybe 1 or 2 more scenes would have been good. Besides that, animation was really nice. The art style is amazing. Something I wanted to bring up is I like the use of 3D as a basis for some of the scenes, and then basically, if I'm not mistaken, you like drew over that, right? Because it was easy to block it out, or am I misinterpreting that?
It went from an animatic, which I did first, which was I made a 3D model, and then from there, like, mapped out the whole script, and then we went back and viewed it and took screenshots of that, and then we recreated that as a 2D drawing, and then I went in and she went and did all the detail work to add it.
I really like that. I think that's a really good pipeline for people who have a 3D background, because it helps you visualize that stuff a lot easier. One thing I wanted to bring up is I feel like the scene where they're burying that seed, yes? I think it works really well, but I feel like stylistically the animation was a little bit different. I think you mentioned that some scenes have slightly different like frame rates and stuff like that. And I think for something like this, it felt a little bit jarring. There are some like TV shows and stuff that will intentionally, I'm sorry, I'm gonna bring up Smiling Friends right now. This really wholesome animation. There's shows like that intentionally mix frame rates and different art styles. And it's funny because it's jarring. But for something like this, it kind of took me out of it and confused me a little bit. But regardless, everything around that I did not question at all, because I thought it looked really, really nice. But just that specific scene, I think, could use some tailoring. But overall, really good work.
Hi. So really awesome. A few things that I think could help heighten it. Sound mixing, some of the character like levels were very, like the mama's very soft, and then the child's voice is like loud. And so like work that out with the mixing, because I think that that'll help keep that somber tone throughout. You had a few like jarring scene transitions, like from when they go out to plant the seed. It felt like a little like, I don't know, there's something kind of weird about the scene transition. So you might want to like massage those a little bit and spend more time evening those out, because that'll help, you know, kind of make it flow really nicely. And yeah, same thing with like the alternate frame rates. You know, you don't want that flow to be interrupted. You want people to just kind of be in that emotional space, especially with a heavy topic like this. And then the other thing is that you alluded to this, you know, you talked about like the 3D models. You had a claymation model in there. Like, we love process. Show more of those processes, especially like when you have a claymation model, it's like, I want to see it, right? So you had a picture and I was like, wait, did you all see a claymation model? So yeah, like show us everything, right? Don't be afraid to show us that stuff, because like, we want to see it, you know? Like part of me is like, make a claymation one too, oh my gosh. But yeah, so I think like there's a, show all the process. Like we're nerds for process. So like, yeah, celebrate all that work you did.
Finn! Good news, laddie! I've been mulling over your station lately, and I think a promotion is overdue.
Promotion?
To head chef! You've been here long enough. You almost know the whole restaurant better than I do.
I'm not so sure about that.
You will do fine, lad. Now, I've got some taxes to do, so I'll be in my office.
I'm not sure what I want. Any recommendations? That's perfect! I'll have an order of the fish and chips then.
Mr. Pullman?
Yeah, what is it, lad?
Where's the fish?
It's in the freezer, you dingus! Now get back to work, laddie!
Bon appetit.
Wow, this is great. This is the best fish and chips I've ever had. What did you put in it?
Laddie, have you taken my chicken lunch?
Hello, my name is Morgan Campbell. I was the director of Fish and Chips. I also did character design, background design, storyboarding, animation, and compositing.
My name is Carly Butler, and I worked on the script, animation, found one of our voice actors, and worked on some of the background art.
I'm Adelina Chaveri, and I worked on storyboarding, animating, and compositing.
My name is Maya Koblenz. I worked on storyboarding and animation.
My name is Damiana Johnson, and I did the character design of Mr. Pullman and the animation.
My name is Quentin Jones. I worked on the storyboard, animation, and I found one of our voice actors.
My name is Ray Lumley, and I'm the assistant director. I helped with sound, background art, animation, and lighting.
I started Fish and Chips in 2023 with a small team as a personal project where we created the original story, concept art, style guide, and animatic.
For the script, it was originally written by Kent alumni Anna Spagnola back in 2023, and the changes we made were mostly to the dialogue plus some action lines, alongside formatting updates for clarity and to help with making shots for the storyboards. One part of the story we put more of a focus into when editing the script was the cooking sequence, since it was the most important part of the story and the main goal of the project. Morgan also made a schedule for what every week of the project would look like, which is what we stuck to with the exception of week 14 and 15, which we combined.
When it came to storyboarding our animation, we were able to use the original 2023 animatic as a jumping off point, but we significantly adapted it to reflect our changes to the script and scope of the project. A lot of scenes were added or changed, and we paid a lot of attention to working out our shot framing and flow at this point.
The characters were designed back in 2023. We gave them a needed redesign to fix some anatomy and to make them look more realistic and less cartoony to fit more into the setting. We decided to change Gal's and Finn's outfit to better blend more into the area.
While creating the backgrounds, I wanted to use a lot of warm tones like oranges, pinks, and purples to match the art direction of the film. In the freezer scene, I wanted it to have a very cavernous, icy feel, so I used cool hues and a lot of atmospheric perspective.
In our animatic, we tested out using puppet vectors from model sheets and paired with key poses from the storyboards and lines from our voice actors. We got a feel for timing. We also made note of background and lighting edits needed.
When deciding on software, we all agreed that Clip Studio Paint would be the best option for how easily accessible it is to use. For each character, we had pre-made assets that we drew beforehand by using Vector Tool. This was done to keep the characters more consistent with each of our shots and to cut down on time, since the asset-made props can be manually transformed, which saved us from having to redraw the characters.
Our characters' faces and limbs were animated from scratch on a separate layer from our puppets. We used model sheets to keep each character's proportions and colors consistent throughout every shot. When the animation was finished, we used vector layers for line art to get a cleaner, higher quality look, and then moved on to color.
Our voice work was done by a few Kent State students, with the exception of Gal's voice actor, who attends Columbia College Chicago. The voices of Finn and Mr. Pullman were recorded here at Kent State using the Student Multimedia Center voice recording booth in the library. The voice recording and compiling were done by Ray using the software Audacity. We greatly appreciate our voice actors for their help in our production of Fish and Chips, and I would also like to give special thanks to Quentin and Ian
for finding our voice actors for Finn and Mr. Pullman, respectively.
In our compositing stage, which was done in After Effects, we introduced color design and lighting to not only make the look of our animation more unified, but dreamy and anime inspired. We also saved time in our development by doing shadows and highlights in the compositing stage rather than having to hand draw them.
Our sound designer, Holland, used Audition to add in lines for Gal, Finn, and Mr. Pullman, as well as music and sound effects.
We will now be opening the room for questions.
So I think this was a really great job by everybody involved here. I wanted to ask one thing. You used the puppets to keep everything consistent with the characters, and I thought that worked really well. And I also think that the faces were kept consistent pretty well too throughout the animation. Do you have anything on how you guys were able to keep that up between different animators in different scenes?
During pre-production, we created model sheets and like style guides to try to like direct people on how to draw the characters a little bit better. As this is a more 3D focused program, the puppets also helped like us make the transition between using like 3D rigs and stuff to animating in 2D.
Yeah, going off of that point, yeah, looks great. Love to see the post-production and compositing work that you did. That adds a lot. Love to see just kind of the color palette shift across different beats in the story as well. You don't really think about that in terms of visual storytelling, but it really just kind of nails in the major plot points in as well, even if you're not thinking about it. I'm gonna kind of like disagree with what you said, Max. There were some parts, at least early on in the animation, where I felt that the face motions weren't actually being super consistently drawn with how the characters were being posed in the actual, quote unquote 3D space. So that just comes with more time and just really looking at that animation play back in full and finding those inconsistencies and just figuring out exactly where things need to be, where things need to stay, keeping track of different points, different landmarks on your character and how they're going to move across in perspective could help with that. But frankly, I have not worked with any sort of 2D puppet animation, but I think that can really add to it. Some timing on certain actions can be looked at in another pass as well. There were a couple things that felt like the action was a little too quick, and certain drawings could have been held for like a couple more frames to really keep that more clear. But overall, this is a great thing that you guys put together.
I want to jump off of something Scott said. The atmosphere in a lot of the scenes, the color theming that you guys did, the color story that you did, really good. Really good. Like, absolutely, we leaned to each other. We're like, oh, that's really good. That's really cool to see. I think that's great. I do think that there were some inconsistencies. After learning how you guys animated it, I kind of understand what I was seeing a little bit more. The cooking scene in particular is like really nice. The scene where they're meshing the meat into like a fish shape or whatever. Like that's really, really nice. But then there's a scene like not 10 seconds before that where the characters are standing across from each other talking, and I felt like one of the characters' wrists was like kind of broken, and the way it was portrayed needed to be cleaned up a little bit. Of course, that's scope and everything, but like it was just a couple things I noticed like that, where I noticed like, oh, hands don't look right, or like the way the wrist is moving doesn't feel exactly right. I also agree that posing is really important. I think holding on some of those stronger poses with more anticipation and more follow through would really sharpen everything up for a lot of the scenes in this. But overall, very good work. It looks really good. Again, I love the color. The freezer scene made me actually laugh really hard because it's not just the freezer, but it's selling that feeling of cold and Arctic expansiveness. You guys did a good job getting that. Yeah.
I definitely had the vibe of like, oh no, I'm back in concession work. um, but yeah, I definitely, I think everybody has a great point that they're saying here. I definitely think in the beginning, some of the animation wasn't, especially when he first talks, it seemed like it wasn't synced right. But then like we get to the freezer scene and it's like really eased out. So I would definitely look back at all the scenes and see which ones actually need a little bit more improvement. But overall, I like the style, I like the color choice, and yeah, I think it's very, very good.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking about, there's so many animators up there doing different scenes, and it all felt cohesive still. So I think you guys did a pretty good job of making it all feel like it was done by the same person. And I know that could be pretty tricky with so many people working on it. It did remind me a lot of SpongeBob, and for some obvious reasons. And one thing I think you could have pushed a little bit more, and I think you were going in this direction, but I thought, I just wanted a little bit more of this, and that's when he showed the final, the artwork of the fish. SpongeBob and Ren and Stimpy would do this with the realistic SpongeBob face, And so if you could have just taken that dish and just made it look super realistic and so much different from the rest, I think it would have been a really fun little thing there. But yeah, overall kudos to just making it feel, consistent and done by the same person, even though it was so many people.
Thank you.
Sweet. So I'm really glad you mentioned SpongeBob. Because SpongeBob. No. So yeah, one, kudos for going with a combo Mr. Krabs and Strong Bad character. But no, I think earlier there was some discussion about like you need to hold some things. You need to let people rest with some of the movements and the jokes. There's also a few areas where I think you could have made it snappier, and that's why I was saying I'm glad you mentioned SpongeBob, because like, you mentioned removing the cartooniness to fit a more grounded style. I actually wish it was a little more cartoony. Those characters had some, it's not like quite all the way into like Has-Been Hotel level or something like that. But there is a cartooniness to like some of those earlier designs, and or even like Loud House type look, where I think there were something like I loved the freezer. There was something a little slow about the freezer movement that I feel like at some point I wish the character would just do the SpongeBob thing and go like stretch their leg out and then like into position. When you had the character like go back to the kitchen, it was just sort of like a very normal walk, and it was kind of a slow sequence. I'm like, this could have been like given a gag, right? It could have been like if he's supposed to be like drudgery walking back to the kitchen, you could have really sold it with like or something like that. So that if it's meant to be that slow, dress it up with something, or allow it to be a little cartoonier and have those like between like characters from getting from point A to point B. Other than that, like I thought it was really good. I like the idea of showing the like with the chicken fish. I think that could have like punched it up because you do have you have a really good gag. I think you could have made it land even better. All of which is to say, like, that was excellent. The feedback you're getting is like, hey, let's take the thing it is and like make it even more of what it is, because I thought that was really good. It was, good story, cohesive, just like a really impressive piece of work.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Hi, everyone. This is our capstone. I'm Grace McCormack. I was the co-project lead, the art director, and just overall director, and had my hands on everything. But yeah.
I'm Victoria Farrell. I was Grace's co-lead, and I was also the project manager and the narrative lead.
I am Issa Weezy. I did the environment design, concepting, and also asset design.
My name is Anna Stevenson. I did the music as well as animatic direction.
My name is Jonah Howe, and I did the level design and the environment design.
My name is Cameron Willis, and I did a lot of coding.
My name is Ty. I did the UI and SFX.
All right, welcome to IAEA.
I am at my wit's end with this temperament of yours. This behavior is unbefitting of a daughter, much less a goddess. We all have our roles, Cersei. You will learn to play yours.
Whether this island is to be my prison or my home. I am more than my father's burden.
In our game Aiea, the player takes the role of the goddess and sorceress Cersei years after being exiled to the island of Aiea by her father, the sun god Helios. Cersei has fallen into a routine of making potions to aid desperate sailors brought to her shore by the god Hermes in exchange for resources unattainable on the island. In our exploration of Cersei's life on the island, we incorporate and reframe classical Greek myths to depict Cersei as a nuanced character detached from the two-dimensional villainess portrayed in the Odyssey, the Argonautica, and Ovid's Metamorphosis. Cersei is reminded of her lifelong alienation by sailors who come to visit the island looking for help, revealing how she has come to be so closed off and why she hopes to use the resources she obtains to become entirely self-sufficient. Historically, the narrative role of women has been secondary to that of men's, and in our research, we found many examples in classical Greek literature. Myths were a way to reinforce societal expectations, depicting powerful women as evil and good women as submissive. This trend persists into modern media with, in 1999, author Gail Simone coined the term refrigerating women or fridging women to describe the concerning trope of women facing inordinate amounts of harm in order to act as motivation for their male counterparts. When creating the story of Aiea, we kept at the forefront the goal to humanize Cersei, a victim of the reductive depictions of women common in Greek literature.
All right, and you might be asking, why Greek mythology? Has it not been overdone? So, the choice of Greek mythology in this case is due to a correlation of no material, time constraints, and pop culture relevancy. So, I have been into Greek mythology since I was in first grade with Michael Townsend's amazing Greek myths of wonders and blunders. So because of that, there was a lot of pre-established knowledge. For pop culture, we have things like the Hades franchise, Epic the Musical, and Madeline Miller's books. And on top of that, just for as an initial data intake for our topic, I found a correlation between narrative games, folklore, and general knowledge of Cersei. And it turns out a lot of people like narrative games, and a lot of people like folklore, but they don't know anything about Cersei. So there is a niche for it, despite, Greek mythology being a big part of pop culture at the moment.
So as soon as we decided on a topic, I knew that I wanted to take advantage of my experience as a composer and decade-long flautist. So first what I did was I dove into the research. I spoke with the ethnomusicology department at Kent State, and then I also poured into documentation of ancient Greek music, both in terms of analysis of what ancient Greek music looked like and the primary documents themselves. And so West and Landell's were my secondary sources, and the primary source that I used was Pullman and West's Documents of Ancient Greek Music. And this is a compilation of all of the different artifacts that we have that document ancient Greek music notation. And so I was able to incorporate real ancient Greek music into the melodies of the game. And so the melodies that I used were Masamides of Crete's Hymn to the Sun and Hymn to Nemesis, as well as 2 other papyri that were unnamed, that were both kind of piecemeal that I had to fit together. And so the flute, the piccolo, and as well as my autoharp were recorded live. And then for the aulos, which is the kind of double-bodied flute that you see there, I recorded that with my digital wind instrument, combining the sounds of the saxophone and the duduk, which is a type of Armenian flute.
All right, and just as much as you would think, oh, we did a lot of research for the narrative, we did a lot of research for the music, it doesn't stop. It goes into the art portion of everything. So one big trend that I've noticed with modern depictions of ancient Greek characters is that they actually take influence from, oh my God, I'm sorry, Taco.
All right, guys. So the SFX process was a lengthy process in which I used resources on campus to record the effects. Using a microphone I acquired from the Performing Arts Library, I recorded sound effects like walking, gathering, and some other effects. Then I used Audacity to mix and craft the sound effects, and then I used a scripting, help from Cam, to stick it into the game. I also created UI mockups that were used as a basis for the final game. I created the health, inventory, and crafting mockups that were taken and then finalized by many of the different artists of the team, such as the health bar there, made by Cirrus, one of our amazing, talented external help.
All right, now I can talk. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, so one big thing I wanted to tackle was differentiating the original Greek designs from what is known as modern designs or anything that was influenced by Roman designs. And examples here, you can see Circe, Hermes, Helios, you'll see Medea at the end. One exception that we had was John William Waterhouse, which he is known for one of the more popular depictions of Circe with his painting Circe offering the cup to Ulysses from 1891. And additionally, for some more references, I was able to go to the Art Institute of Chicago, as well as the CMA. The Cleveland Museum of Art actually has a vase with Medea on it that I used as a reference. Additionally, for clothes references, I took Catherine Leslie's History of Costume class through Kent State, in which I had references for Cretan, Minoan, Mycenaean, and Etruscan clothing. All of these design principles were used for narratively relevant characters. We also have some Easter eggs and cameos that you can see in the game and the trailer, and then we were able to use clothing to apply to those designs, which is pretty fun. Yeah.
So the environment concepting started with research on the actual Mediterranean coast, and we took geographically accurate flora and applied it to our in-game landscape, which is what gives us our in-game landscape that is both realistic and whimsical. The individual plant assets were drawn after Grace's style guide, which is shown on the slide, and so we had to translate some pretty complicated plants into simple 2D assets. And this 2D style guide was also used as a guideline to create the parallax scenes that we utilized throughout the rest of the game.
Since the tutorial starts and ends in the same location, I designed it in a loop. Progression is straightforward with small optional paths. The herbs needed for the sailors at the harbor are placed in spots of progression, and many optional paths and pickups are framed before the player can access them. For the environments, I use sorting groups and a perspective camera to create parallax. Each sorted group is placed at a different depth on the z-axis. Assets have varying amounts of saturation and blur applied to them based on their position in the environment, and there are also blurs and particle effects to imply lighting.
IA is comprised of many handcrafted scripts that help form the basis of gameplay. Here are a few systems on the screen that I would like to focus on, though there is a lot of code that has gone into this. Starting off with the event system, it handles what the player has access to, such as an area or an NPC that they're able to interact with. It essentially is just a flag that contains a bool that when you check it, it would enable different things and disable other things. Another thing I'd like to touch on is our enemy AI, which is a reusable brain that runs a simple state machine to determine its current action. It is...
Do you want to finish?
Okay. Finally, our inventory system allows the player to collect objects, such as different plants and different items. This then connects to our crafting system, which allows Cersei to make different potions.
We plan to continue on with the project of IAEA, and some of our stretch goals have already had some work. As you can see, we have work for the climbing animations and the attack.
But yeah, so Q&A time. Thank you, guys.
Dude, I'm so into this. Yeah, amazing job you guys have done. Just like the cohesion in your, finding the right word, but I'll just say inspiration, just like all of the different insight that you brought from, all throughout the like art direction process and even in the music as well. I love to see that. Yeah, the visuals are incredible, on point. My only point of critique is just generally with how the character interacts with the environment. One thing I noticed in the trailer is when we actually got to gameplay and the character was in motion, just their speed and the walk cycle didn't really match very well, so there was a lot of foot slide with how they were moving across the screen versus the speed of their walk cycle. So generally, like that can kind of come down to the like scale of your level, the scale of your like level metrics, or just kind of adjusting animations to account for that, and just kind of like juicing things a little bit more to really nail down the kind of platforming gameplay that you have in there and have that kind of elevate like all of the incredible artwork that you guys have done and not have that be a hindrance to what it is. But like, this is really great. I'm really excited to like see where this goes.
Yeah. Okay. I definitely think that, first of all, I'm just blown away by how much you were able to do in a semester, or like you probably were pre-planning. I mean, did you just do this in just this semester, or was this like an idea that has been kind of growing?
We started ideation in the summer, right after the spring semester ended, but
we started ideating like right after the spring showcase, actually, or actually during it. We knew we wanted to do something with Greek mythology, and I've always wanted to make games that are meaningful to me, so we combined the two, and we're able to get ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like the fact that you guys kind of already knew what you guys wanted to do. There's nothing against the rules of like working outside of class, which definitely you guys just were like, let's go. And then because of that, you guys were able to get this far, and the fact that you have even bigger levels planned, that's just insane. But yeah, I mean, like, I think you guys definitely have a lot going for, like, you already have, like, a game, basically. You just polish it and even more. I mean, I don't have any bad critiques. I mean, except for the slide where the walk cycle felt or their walk was like too fast in terms of how fast she's just sliding. That would be like my main feedback, is fixing the walk or whatever. Yeah.
I do want to note that all of this couldn't be done with some external help that we were able to get with some networking and just some general friends. Izzy Strick and Cirrus Reynolds were able to help with some of the asset concepting as well as the creation. Dawson Turska and Kevin McGee were able to help with a lot of the coding, and we're extremely grateful for their help, and also the voice acting as well. It was all people who weren't on this project, except for we have an animatic cutscene that Issa does some voice acting in, but it's all like a combination of working together with people, and it was a struggle, but thankfully I had a co-lead and we were able to, I think we were managing a 15-person team, but the majority of everything was done by all of us. So, yeah.
I wanted to add, great job also on the video, visuals and everything. Real quick, I don't know if this is still just because it's pre-production or not, but for some of these assets that I'm seeing here, they might have thicker outlines than normal, and I think that it might be good for consistency to try to keep them within the same, like, they don't have to be exact, of course, but like keep them within a certain margin. And then also for NPCs, are you considering animating them, like giving them idle and everything?
Yeah, absolutely. Hermes actually has a tiny idle animation currently, but everyone else, it was more of a time constraint. Also for the assets, everything that you see is like based off of 5 asset sheets that I was able to pump out within 2 weeks, because I was focusing more on the character animation because I wanted to make sure that the sprites look good. So it's gonna be, Jonah honestly was able to make more out of the sprites that I gave him than I thought he'd be able to, and I need to give him a tremendous credit for that. But it's definitely, it's more down to time, but I love drawing and I'd love to make more assets, and I'd definitely like for him to have more.
If we had let Grace, she would have worked herself to death on this project. A lot of it was me being like, scope, please.
Hi.
Hi.
So, yeah, I echo a lot of what's been said. Scott took my piece of negative feedback, which was the run cycle or walk cycle on a run speed. So you've heard that twice already. I'm not going to say it again. Yeah, amazing. This is like, I'm both so into this, but also like, this is like an awesome capstone. Like just an example of the concept of the class coming up here and be like, we did this intensive, like, you were very descriptive about your research. You walked us through your thought processes. You walked us very specifically and very carefully through your precedents and your inspirations. You let those things have time. You know, you walked us through the creative process of this. I think, you know, this is the kind of presentation, like, I want to show my students in Capstone next semester, you know, to be like, hey, do that. Like, this is how you walk through research, right? This is almost grad school level work. And then, you know, you mentioned like handing Jonah like a handful of assets and then he like made a world. Like, there's actually a joke I saw about environment art that was like, hey, what can you do with like a bush and 3 rocks? Make a world. Yeah, so awesome, you did it. You did the thing. In terms of, I agree with the line weight thing. You know, polish, that happens. And then the other thing I was gonna say is, with your foreground and background, and you kind of have it going on here a little bit. So you talked about blurring background elements to give them a sense of distance. That's really well executed. You can even, don't be afraid to blur them even more. Like I mentioned Silksong earlier, like sometimes I think Hollow Knight games do it too much, but they like blur real hard, real early. But you can do that blur, and I think it'll help. The other thing you can do, if you want those backgrounds to be cleaner and not just immediately like snap into blur, is give background elements non-black outlines. So have like a set of assets that is the black outline that's more closer to the foreground, and then have the non-black outlines, and I think that'll help differentiate things a little bit more. And then the other thing, you're using Unity, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Post-processing lets you desaturate things past like a certain in the background, so you can do that and like fudge it if you want to like monkey with the colors through the post-processing tools. So yeah, awesome, really great. Keep it up. Make it a full thing.
Everybody said it already. Looks great. I think that you made this project specifically to make Chris smile because watching you guys talk about your research was very inspiring, and the fact that I believe you said you had some kind of background in it and knew about it already, right? Definitely shows. The music, looking up what type of plants are in the Mediterranean area, I was like, this is exactly how much work you should put into something like this. So good on you for going really deep with all of that stuff. Something I wanted to bring up was I really like your guys' trailer. I know it's kind of hard to do a trailer for a game like this, but I think one thing that would really sell me is seeing more full arts and maybe some names for the characters. So, you know, like a big splash screen that's like, you know, you can have that awesome animated intro and then go to something that's like featuring this character with like a big splash screen and their name, and then like, you know, gameplay, and then like you show another character in a text box, like with what you have now where it's like, oh, I'm talking to Hermes or I'm talking to whoever, and then they get their own splash screen, because your character art is really good, but I want it to shine. I don't want the text box in front of it on a trailer. I want to see the character art a little bit more. Yeah, it's really good.
Thank you.
All right, so well, I'm loud. So I love everything about it. Everyone already said everything. So my question is, what's next? What's coming up? What can I look forward to?
So originally I had planned a game that had 3 levels for our capstone, and we were going to incorporate the Argonautica. We were going to have Jason and Medea come to the island and use that to continue to push our meaning of this like female role in men's stories, and developing these characters outside of the story of men. However, we had to consider scope, and there was some unexpected events that led to a lot of things being cut. But we have things planned. We have narrative like myths that we want to incorporate.
And additionally, like Jonah literally designed all the levels. If you want to talk about them.
Yeah. So after the tutorial, there is a second level that sort of has branching paths that lead to the vine ability. It's kind of like how Metroid Dread designed, like it's always like 2 paths that lead to the same thing. And then once you get the vine ability, you will unlock another spot back at the tutorial. You can continue progressing into level 3. So that's sort of the plan.
But yeah, like we already have the attack component ideated. We have the animation for the vine climbing ideated. It's kind of just a matter of finding the time and giving ourselves a break after graduating.
I really liked what you mentioned about bringing feminine characters to the forefront and changing the story. I appreciate that. I wanted to mention that, but I forgot. My second thing, we only have 1 minute left. Look at cameras in 2D platformers and see what you can learn from that. Yeah. Games like Hollow Knight and games like Little Nemo and the Nightmare Fiends. Wow. Look at that and see what you can learn about how the camera follows the player, because it will make your game feel 100 times better.
And then I was going to quickly say, are you guys going to go to any game conferences?
We definitely want to go to GDEX, and I know that Cleveland Gaming Classic is moving to like the Huntington Center, which is going to be great. We already have like little freebies and stickers that we're going to pass out in the lobby if anyone wants any. I like modeled some boars and we hand painted them and also designed some stickers. So
Love it.
yeah. Yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Oh.
If you plan on if you really are planning on like finishing this game, create a Steam page now so people can wish list it.
Thank you. Thank you guys.
All right. Hi. So that concludes the 2025 Fall Showcase. Thank you, everybody, for making this a success. It is truly humbling to see how the bar raises every year and every semester. And like, I think this semester especially, we were just like, wow, amazing. Amazing, like one project after another. So, you know, pat yourselves on the back, give yourselves a round of applause, because you really all kicked butt this year. You know, and thank you again to our industry guests and critics for giving their critiques and helping our students know what to do next. And with that, we do have some time out in the lobby to go play some of the games and hang out for a few minutes before they kick us out so they can prep the space for what's next for the Performing Arts Center. So thank you again, and thank you again all the Performing Arts Center folks for putting up with us and helping us put this on, because we couldn't do it without you. This is amazing. All right, bye. Good night.